Welcome to the Creating with Beauty podcast, where God's love and beauty flow through our hearts and hands with peace and intention. Here you'll find honest conversations, inspiring stories, and gentle invitations to create with the beauty and wonder already in your life. Beauty is both a gift and an invitation, leading us down a sacred path with Jesus.
Micro griefs that we experience when life didn't go the way we hoped that it would go without any input from us, I guess, and so being grateful allows me to see things as beautiful, as put there for me. Of creation is holding me right now in this position of having beauty around me everywhere I'm willing to see it.
What opened your eyes to beauty and creation as one of God's love languages?
Well, I want to feel like I'm a part of the world that I live in. I want to feel like I belong here in my life, in my day, in my community, on my land, that sense of like, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be. Not in the sense that I couldn't feel that way somewhere else too, but just like where I am in this moment right now is where God put me for reasons I may or may not understand. And so I'm going to love it. I'm going to love it to the best of my ability. It doesn't always feel that way. Sometimes it's like, come on, this, oh, are you sure you know what you're doing? But there's, as cliche as it sounds, and I'm going through a season where this feels more potent than ever, is appreciation and gratitude. There's, I know this isn't a podcast about grief, but I'll just mention for those who don't know me, I just lost my dad 4 months ago, and he was the 7th person close to me that I lost in the last 4 years, including my mom, a brother-in-law, one of my stepdads, like close people, my father-in-law. So it's been like, we'll say compound grief is a term that a lot of people use, but you know what else it has been? Like expanded gratitude. Would I love it if my dad just walked in the door right now? Absolutely. Absolutely. But the gratitude, like if someone were to ask me, and this has happened a few times in the last couple months, how you doing? My three-word answer is I'm gutted and grateful, because both of those things are true right now. I'm learning how to navigate with a map that my dad used to navigate for me, kind of a thing. Like lots of my own roles within my own life are changing. I'm having to be my own voice of wisdom now because my dad was that for a long time, right? Like there's different mantles now that are on my shoulder for myself that it's just the way of it. It's just the way of it when we lose people ahead of us, whether they're parents or mentors or neighbors or people that we just really, really loved. And the only way I know how to navigate grief, here I am saying this after losing 7 people in such a short amount of time, all of them, every single one of them unexpected, and all of them very quickly, like within 24 hours, they were fine. And then they were gone for most of them.
Wow.
Like very quickly. Is like, there's no way I could navigate this without intentionally being grateful as much as possible. And that's not toxic positivity. That's not like spiritual bypassing. That's realizing what's real. 'Cause I'm devastated that my dad's gone. And also I'm so grateful that he's not physically suffering anymore, that he didn't die alone in his chair. I could give you a list a mile long of all the things that I'm truly, genuinely grateful for, while also being really heartbroken that he's gone. Like those things have to coexist together. And I think even for people who haven't lost somebody, there's so many of us are walking around with some level of grief even if it's just in the context of like, oh, I thought I'd have things figured out by now. I was talking with one of my best friends. She's 2 weeks and 3 weeks and 3 days older than me. And she's a nurse and she's an amazing person. And she's sitting there going, what do I want to do with my life? And we were joking about, she's like, I thought I'd have it figured out by now, you know? And that, as much as we can laugh about that, when we're alone, so many of us feel just so much grief about it. Am I going to get it together in time? Am I going to feel purposeful enough in time? Like all of these little micro griefs that we experience when life didn't go the way we hoped that it would go without any input from us, or I guess. And so being grateful allows me to see things as beautiful, as
Mhm.
as put there for me.
Yep.
Put there for me to be. I'm looking out on my oaks right now and the moss trees growing on the north side of them. And they're just dirty old trees, right? But are they? You know,
Right. Right.
they're also they just exist. And an acorn fell however many decades ago. Now they're this beautiful tree. All of creation is holding me right now in this position of having beauty around me everywhere I'm willing to see it. And I will talk to my husband sometimes jokingly, but half not jokingly, like, what am I going to do with my life? And he'll go, you're doing it.
Mm.
And it reminds me of like, oh yeah, the most important thing I could do with my life is be in the moment, be grateful. Like being grateful and actively expressing appreciation to me are two different things. And I think they're both super, super important. And, so actively expressing appreciation to God for all of this that I'm grateful for.
Mm.
That awakens in me eyesight, spiritual eyesight, physical eyesight, creative eyesight that is just kind of half asleep when I'm walking around just understandably sad that my dad's gone, or understandably, bored with the internet or social media, or understandably exhausted with trying to keep up with algorithms, like all of that slowly depletes a spark. The
Mhm.
only way I have figured out how to, no matter what I do, no matter how many new art supplies or new classes or artist dates or all of those tricks, right? That we're all offered in copious amounts to inspire ourselves, all of them pale in comparison to mindfully being grateful in the moment. All
Mhm.
of them pale in comparison to that. They're all part of it. They're all fun. But if you only do those things and you never actively choose, like looking over my land right now, it's like, wow, look at our kingdom. I say that to my husband sometimes, like, we live on kind of a hill and we've got 2.5 acres. And I can tell you the list a mile long of all the things that don't look right, that still aren't done, that don't, of the land. But when I just stop and I'm just grateful for how beautiful it is right now, like, wow, it's hard to put into words and it sounds so cliche and cheesy, but the feeling of it is really
Mhm.
potent.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And I think gratitude is the basis for living your fullest life, really. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
having intentionally having the eyes to see the beauty and the gifts and the things that he has put in your life. As simple as for me, this journey started back after a car accident, and it was
Mm,
debilitating. And that's when I started really tapping into my creativity. But I was in despair. I was in so much pain. I
mm,
was miserable. I had my daughter was like 2 at the time, and
mm,
and just the prognosis for all of it wasn't that great. And then it was like, I remember taking my daughter out underneath the apple trees at the time. We had a picnic and we laid there and we looked at the clouds and we made, like we dinosaurs or whatever we saw in the clouds. And that moment changed me because I knew
mm,
that God was reaching me in that moment and telling me, you have so much to be grateful for. And not in the not in a bad way, but that's how my brain was like, you have so much to be grateful for. Focus on
Yeah.
those
It's a
things. Focus
shift.
on the goodness that he has in your life, no matter how hard life gets. And if it's grief, if it's sickness, if it's cancer, if it's whatever it is, he's still there in the moss on your oak tree,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Sharing a glimpse of his love for you was something so
Yeah.
simple, but yet so meaningful, because when we're raw in those moments is when we need it the most. And
Yeah.
that is what renews our minds, you know?
Well, and it increases our capacity.
Yeah.
In my experience, it increases our capacity to navigate the really challenging journeys.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I felt like I don't have it in me. Whatever is going to be asked of me next, I don't have it in me.
Yeah.
And and when I just kind of like go to bed with that thought, I wake up with it, it lingers. I just keep not having it in me. But when I say it doesn't feel like I have it in me, but holy cow, look at how beautiful the orchard is right now.
Yeah.
Maybe and it's so for a skeptic or for a non-spiritual person's like, what? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And that's fine. Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
my own weird little alchemy that works for me. But there is something that about actively expressing and observing and experiencing gratitude that increases my capacity to like have it in me, whatever I'm
Yeah.
handling, and even if all it does is remind me that this too shall pass. Like sometimes that's all it does, but
Mm-hmm.
that's all I need in
Yeah.
that moment. I'm not walking around just um giddily celebrating everything. I have to work so hard right now at gratitude
Yeah.
because the heavier thing is the grief. The heavier thing is there's a lot of other heavier things. And so it's not and I consider myself, generally speaking, always for my life, very optimistic, very Pollyanna, very like imagining the best thing. And so being in a season of life where I feel like I have to work at that, it's really
Mm-hmm.
humbling. It's like, oh, okay, this is the real spiritual work of gratitude. It's easy to be grateful when everything's like all happy and cool and easy,
Yeah.
but when you choose to be grateful when it feels too hard to be, that's when it carries the most um it's like the warmest, most comforting, most empowering flavor of gratitude for me.
Yes. Yes. That's a beautiful way to describe it. Absolutely. And I think you also touched on, there's a saying that goes around that says, God won't give you more than you can handle. And
Yeah.
that's not the saying. And I mean, I'm sure people say that, but it's actually, God won't give you more than you can handle without him.
Mm.
And so it's the seeking of him and the gratitude and the beauty. And the beauty is even in a smile from your husband across the room. It doesn't have to be like this magnificent, sometimes they are, right? But it's just the everyday simple moments, like you said, like the moss on your oak tree or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and then how many of us, just to kind of piggyback on that, God can't give you more than you can handle kind of a thing. I think the most important work that we can do with that phrase is being really honest with ourselves about how much God is giving us and how much we're doing to ourselves.
Stephanie Lee, I
You
love you
know?
for that.
Like
You just say it
like
how it is. Yes.
oh, I'm gonna sit here and put all this pressure on myself, but it's okay because God can't give me anything more than I can handle. It's like, wait a second, God's not doing this to me. I'm
Right.
doing this to me.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes learning learning the reality of that phrase is taking responsibility for the unnecessary weights we put on ourselves, mostly
Mhm.
in our own mind, I think,
Yeah.
that this isn't about God putting this on us. This is about God letting us be who we're going to be and us deciding what we're going to do with that, or what are we going to do with these free thinking minds that he gave us? Are we going to use them to abuse ourselves or are we going to use them to create? Most
Right.
of us do a little bit of both, you know?
I love that. We're going to
That's
abuse
like,
ourselves
that's
or we're
like,
going to create. Yeah.
yeah, that's like some people like say, well, everything happens for a reason. And then the other thing is like, and the reason is you're an idiot, you know? It's kind of like, let's be honest with ourselves about how much we're putting on how much is on our
Yeah.
shoulders that we put on ourselves.
Yes.
And that can be alleviated with something as simple as, letting ourselves play with creativity or having some gratitude or, forgiving somebody, all of those things that could come into play.
How does your art carry your testimony?
I love this question so much. I explored it in my journal a lot before our conversation because I felt, just reading the question, it felt like there was a lot in me. And I was like, I gotta pull this out. And so I was pondering and reflecting on what testimony is to me. I grew up in a church. Testimonies were things that we shared a lot with each other. And it was usually in the context of, sharing our belief in the church, sharing our belief in God's love, all of that kind of stuff. But I thought, like God is in my business, but he's not in my marketing, right? Like
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't advertise that I'm a Jesus girl on my website. That's just what's going on with me. And I think people who want that everywhere, and there are people who don't. And I think both are equally as authentic and true, right? So for me, I'm not in my art career, I'm surrounded by at least as many non-Christians or non-religious or faith-based people
Mm-hmm.
as I am, faith-based people. My community, when I really look at my conversations that I've had with one-on-one people, I would almost dare say it's a 50-50 split. I can't say for sure, and so it's like, okay, wait a second. If we're not all gathering every Sunday in church to share our testimonies, what does that look like in my creative practice?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there are a lot of people who will never in this life have any desire to know God,
Mm-hmm.
but they are going to experience everything God has to offer those of us that do know him. He's going to give it to them just as well, whatever they call it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's available to them as well. Maybe there's some limitations. I don't know. I'm not going to assert that I know that. And so what does it look like for me as an artist in communities with people who aren't faith-based to live out my testimony? If I know that it's not about sharing God with them in the way that's, so kind of like open and obvious. Like, what does it look like to share the love of God with somebody who isn't interested, kind of a thing, right? Through creativity. And I don't consider it my life's mission to proselyte, but at the same time, I'm an extension of the creator. So on some level, how can I not, in a way, right? So it's like I'm always kind of like navigating that question. But for me now, in this context, my testimony is more about like living and sharing in a way that like it's like I'm sharing my personal experiences of God's love, of experiencing grace, of more than anything, experience the transformation that comes through those things, right? And all of that can exist and be expressed, even if someone doesn't agree with who I think deserves credit for that, right?
Right.
Even if someone doesn't give God that credit, it can still be really beautiful medicine for somebody. And so that has been, I think, one of my first agreements, I guess, that I've made with God is allowing my testimony to exist in a way that doesn't always look like church testimony.
Right.
Because he's not here just for those people.
Right.
And I don't consider myself responsible for bringing those people to him.
Right.
I just want to live in such a way that I'm in alignment with what I know my blessings have been, what I've been blessed with, and that I give it to anybody. I'm not discriminating who deserves the benefits of my creative expression. It's not just for people who also love God, right?
Right.
So for me, it's like I just want my life to be a witness of the transformation of loving God. That to me is like the most distilled way I can describe my testimony is like being a living witness of the transformation that happens when I give my life and my beliefs and my heart. And I also like, I know a lot of Christians really have a hard time with the idea of like co-creating, but like being willing to do whatever work it takes alongside the work God's doing in me to also show up and do whatever work I need to do to keep my heart in a good place, right?
Right.
So, and the whole when I go down the line a little bit, like, well, okay, well, why does that matter to live as a witness, to live out my testimony, not necessarily of any specific doctrine or dogma, but of a loving creator. Like, what does that look like? And why bother? And for me right now, it's because we we all have the opportunity and the invitation to create a rally cry for the people that we have the ability to influence.
Mhm.
And what is my rally cry going to be? You know, and it's kind of like the cyclical thing of like when I really walk in my testimony, when I really live in gratitude for the transformations that have happened in my life that are continuing to happen, what do I know because of that? What do I now know because of that? And that's what comes in. That's where the encouragement to other artists comes in.
Mm.
Like, I'm not necessarily here to encourage everybody to make art. That might not be the way that you express yourself the most authentically.
Right.
I'm not even here to tell you that everybody's a creative person. We all get to decide what creativity looks for us. But I want to encourage people to do whatever that thing is that you you're scared to do, that you're hungry to do, that you're curious about doing, and trust that you'll figure it out and trust that it's going to be good for you. Like that's kind of my rally cry. Like I may only be a half a step ahead, but it's enough to drag you along, kind of a thing. Not to um not to pretend to have any sort of like supernatural knowledge or having evolved spiritually, so be so evolved that I don't struggle with,
Right.
human things, but to say like, look, we're all in this together,
Mhm.
and whatever this thing is, we can make it really, really beautiful.
Right.
And just do it scared, do it messy, do it confused, create in whatever way. Make a new friend if that feels scary. Paint something if that feels scary. Like figure out whatever that thing is that feels just scary enough that if you do it, you're like, wow, I did that,
Yeah.
you know? And that would be the value for me more than anything of cultivating my testimony, nurturing my testimony is so that my rally cry can get clearer and it can be sharp and clear enough that if somebody needs to hear it, they can hear it. I'm not muffling it. I'm not spiritually or metaphorically or physically muffling my voice.
Yeah.
I'm using it to call out to anyone that wants to come along with a journey of being messy and brave anyway, in whatever way that looks for them. And it
Right.
shows up in so many things. It shows up in our relationships and in the way we care for our bodies and in the way we create art and in the jobs we take or don't take. I mean, it shows up everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's not exclusive to artists or creative people, but I feel like we artists and creative people are lucky in that we have kind of boundless ways that we can express it, and we can just call it art, and nobody thinks it has to make sense, like, oh, she's an artist, I don't get it, and you're like, yep, you don't have to get it, I'm working out my stuff here, right?
I love that. Oh my gosh. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to make sense. Yeah.
No, it doesn't
Yeah.
even have to make sense to me, and most of the time, to be fair, it doesn't. Most of the time, something I'm doing, I don't know if this is going to make sense to who. Doesn't matter. That's one of
Yeah.
my inner critic things is it needs to make sense. And I'm like, does it? To who?
That's-
What does it mean to make sense? And it's like, can't answer that.
Okay, but in the art that I've seen that you've shared, I've never looked at it and been like, that doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
Right?
So why am I sitting there in my garage worried that it doesn't make sense to anybody?
Right.
Thank you for confirming.
You're welcome. Melanie says it makes sense. Like, I don't look at it and go, it doesn't make sense. No, you look at it and you go, okay, well, what's the meaning here? Or it's beautiful. Or is she trying to say something? Or like, again, like with the image of you with the flowers, or,
Mm-hmm.
um, oh, you did some encaustic pieces, I think, for a coffee shop.
Mm-hmm.
And you had the birds flowing through. Like
Mm-hmm.
those were beautiful, right? So did you ask if those made sense? Because right, like, but the point is to make us
Yeah.
feel something, right? And so
Yeah.
if we're looking at art, we're looking to possibly feel something or see something
Yep.
different. We're not going, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Now, I will say there probably have been other things, not you, but stuff that maybe I don't look at. And granted, it's art, and I will be like, I don't understand that. So maybe it's subjective,
which is
right?
different than that doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
I don't
true.
get it is different than that doesn't make sense. And that's what I mean,
Yeah.
where I run into it is if I'm in conversation with like fine artists who are very academically trained and
Yeah.
all of that's wonderful and good. It doesn't make sense to them what I do, and that's totally okay.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Like
Yeah.
making sense isn't like the pinnacle of success,
Right.
you know. So,
And on that note, and I know this because I've taken some of your classes, and I'm going to say this, the fact that you put acrylic over encaustic, I
doesn't
absolutely
make
love.
sense.
I absolutely love it though. Do you know how freeing it was to be like, I
Mhm.
can do this and it's not going to
Mhm.
fall apart, and
Mhm.
yeah, get the little bit of texture from, yeah.
Yep.
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 Anyways,
It
this
just
is,
doesn't make sense to be able to do that, but here I am doing it anyway.
yeah, for
And
like
now
20
here you
years.
are doing it.
Yeah,
Yep.
I do love it. There's such satisfaction of putting the paint in and then wiping it away and seeing it fill those little pockets
Yeah.
of encaustic. So,
Yeah.
but to other people to professionally trained encaustic artists, that doesn't make sense, but that's okay.
Yeah. And just to clarify on that, there's good reasons why there are rules about what
Yes.
mediums can go together.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
those reasons are based on a specific set of criteria.
Yeah.
And if you change the set of criteria, the rules change.
Yes. Right.
That's one of my favorite things to figure out is how might this rule, like why is this rule legitimate and how might it not be legitimate? It's
Yeah.
not about breaking the rules just to be a rebellious little punk. It's about being endlessly curious to know why something works together and how might it be different if this criteria changes. And will I
Right.
like the end results better?
Yeah.
That's all I care about. Well, not all I care about, but that's a big part. Like, do I
Right.
like how it ended up? And I know that's like taboo to say that the end results matter to me, but the end result isn't necessarily the finished piece of art. It's the end result for me is whatever answer I get to whatever question I had. So
Oh,
I had
okay.
I had X question and then I did it and here was the end result. That doesn't have anything to do with whether the art's done or not. So to me, those end results matter because they answer the questions that, I love bringing to the process.
So when you create art, like, this
Mm-hmm.
is a broad question. So when
Mm-hmm.
you're creating, when you go into your studio or wherever you're creating now and you start to create something, are you always answering questions? Or is there sometimes you just make to make, or
Well, both are true.
okay.
Um, and to the degree that I'm answering questions, yes. And what that looks like is what happens if I do this,
Yeah,
which can
okay.
also be what I'm doing just to make,
Yeah.
you know. If I glue this paper down, does it answer if I put this piece of collage material right here in this spot, just for funsies, does it answer the question of making that spot feel better?
Okay. Yeah.
So sometimes the questions are just more like creative impulses. Sometimes they're very like defined questions. What happens if A and B? Do you get C?
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the process of creativity, for me anyway, is an endless journey of answering questions.
Right. Right. I guess I was thinking more because a couple times now you've said like the plaster gesso, you
Mm-hmm.
answered a deep question which changed how
Mm-hmm.
you made your art,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I know the question of the reason why the latex or the why do I keep calling it
Mm-hmm.
latex? The reason
Acrylic.
why the
Because I
acrylic
use
paint
latex too.
that's
Yeah.
why I keep saying latex. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why the acrylic paint or the encaustic, why that works though, but you figured out how to make that work with that other underlying medium that you put underneath, right? So
Right.
I'm not wanting to give away your classes.
Oh, that's
Which you
fine.
could find that in Rubble and Caustics, I believe.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but then so sometimes it's like you have these deep questions that kind of change how everything's made, at least for
Yep.
you, and then other times it's just fun,
Yeah. Yeah.
experiments. So
Yeah. It's like big questions and little questions,
yeah,
obvious questions and more subtle questions,
yeah, right,
and all sorts of variations in between.
yeah. So how do you determine the difference between striving and surrender?
Yeah. So this has been a really big part of my journey just as a human the last, say, decade. Is like, what does it even look like to surrender? If I surrender, is anything going to even happen? Aren't we supposed to just strive and progress and grow all the time? Like always kind of like not wrestling, but like trying to figure out which is the right one, right? Striving versus surrendering. And for me, the way I define it in this context, if I'm going to create contrast between the two, striving when it's done from this like self-reliant, egotistical, I'm gonna conquer this thing, me, prideful sometimes. Um, when it's really attached to the outcomes, that's the kind of striving that for me is exhausting on all levels. It's frustrating, it's exhausting because I can control outcomes half the time. I'm I'm just like clenched up in all ways trying to create those outcomes that I can't control. A lot of the times the striving is rooted in some sort of fear. I'm either trying to make sure something happens that I'm afraid won't happen, or I'm trying to make sure something doesn't happen that I'm afraid will happen. That's the kind of striving I'm not about. But I'm also not about the kind of surrender that looks like just sitting there waiting to be told what to do.
Mhm.
That's and I'm not just talking about like for a moment. I'm talking about like for your life, right? Like
Yeah.
I was in a conversation with a friend, and this might kind of like rub some people the wrong way, but I was in a conversation with someone within the last year where they were making a big change in their life. And I knew this person well enough to know this is a change this person really, really, really wants. And it was a completely fine, beautiful, wonderful change. But what was interesting is in the conversations that we had about it, all the person ever said was, "This is what God wants. I feel like this is what God wants for me. This is what God wants for me." And I just remember thinking, like, did you know it's okay to just want it yourself? Like, don't like it felt like that was the way they could justify making this big change, was to convince us that God wanted that for them.
Mhm.
And I'm not here to say whether God did or didn't. That is not my place to say.
Right.
But it was so interesting to notice how anxious this person was to convince us that that's what God wanted for them. And I remember thinking, like, God wants for you what you want for you. That was in that context. I remember thinking, like, it's okay to just say, like, I really want it. I really want this new experience. God, is that okay? Like, can I do this? And I feel like a lot of the times we're waiting to hear what's right according to what we think God wants for us. And a lot of the times, not always, but I think a lot of the times, God wants us to make whatever we have the right thing.
Mhm.
Like bloom where you're planted kind of a thing, right? Like we're looking for something else always to be the right thing instead of making the thing we're in the right thing with by doing all the same sort of inner work that we're going to have to do no matter what guidance we follow. We still have to do our own spiritual homework and cultivate our testimony and cultivate a connection with God, no matter where we are, whether we're where we think He wants us or where we think we're stuck, that we're trying to make good, all of that kind of stuff. But the surrendering that, to me, there's a dark and a light side to striving and a dark and a light side to surrendering. I don't think that they are the opposite of each other, that within each one there can be an opposite. And so I want the kind of striving that knows that whatever good I have now was what I used to pray for, which means there's good still ahead of me. And I want to strive to be the person that is able to receive that good.
Yes.
I want to strive in to be clean in my character, to be to have an open mind to hear whatever God's messages for me in that moment, or whatever I need to correct in myself. That's the kind of striving I want. The surrender comes in where that will lead me, like what the benefits of all that striving is going to be. I can have an idea of hey, I'm going to strive to sell 100 pieces of art this year. Well, my job is to create the art and to do it with joy and authenticity and to create beautiful art, not to just, oh, I gotta hurry and get 100 done, that kind of thing, like that kind of anxious, fearful striving versus I'm gonna just keep creating beautiful art and I'll stack them over here in stacks of tens. And then when I have 10 stacks, I know I have 100, sort of kind of a looseness about it. And I'd like to sell all those this year, but the surrendering is going to come in with who buys them, how quickly they sell, where I sell. There's still going to be some kind of surrender that comes into play. And so for me, when I know that I'm doing something, I'm tense, I'm anxious, and I'm in fear, that's the shadow side of the striving. When I'm trying to control some sort of outcome. But if I'm striving because I can see where I want to grow, I can see where I have an opportunity to grow, and it's going to create some discomfort. Like if I want to be able to run a mile, I got to start by striving to run a tenth of a mile, right? But it's the kind of striving that's uncomfortable. It's hurts. It's going to make me breathe heavy. I'm probably going to sweat and get red-faced, but it's not because I'm afraid I can't get a mile if I don't do this. It's oh, I know what I'm working towards. I have this goal. I have this vision. I might not ever be able to run a mile. That's where the surrender comes. I'm going to do what I can to grow to be most likely to be able to accomplish that goal. But maybe I'm going to strive to run a mile because I'm going to go on some hike up a mountain, and that endurance is going to get me up that mountain, and it's not a mile. It could be just something totally different. So the surrender comes mostly in surrendering what the outcomes are that I think are best, while also holding the faith that there might be something even better. And so my striving is going to come in developing myself, developing my own courage, being willing to do uncomfortable things that have positive net results. It's such a kind of a mercurial thing to explain, but so many of us are terrified of discomfort in any way, shape, or form. And so we've created all of these ways of describing it, I'm the discomfort of we have doom scrolling habits. We eat way too much sugary food. We avoid making phone calls. We sit around too much. We have all of these habits that we've created because doing the opposite is uncomfortable, but it's the discomfort of doing those better things that makes us the person capable of creating or receiving the things that we really want.
Yeah.
So that striving versus surrendering thing, I think more than anything, it's just really important to remember that they're not opposites. Striving and surrender aren't opposites. They can each be amazing or each be really limiting, depending on And for me, the best way I know how to determine where I'm at in those is, asking myself, like, who do I want to be in 5 years? And
Mhm.
that's not the same question of like, where do I want my business to be, or how much money do I want to have, or any of that. It's who do I want to be? How do I want to feel? Do I want to be lighthearted and in love with my life and excited about whatever it is I'm creating without being specific about it in that moment? And if so, let's kind of like, reverse engineer it. They say, like, how do I need to be thinking about myself right now in this moment? How do I need to be thinking about this challenge in front of me? How do I need to be thinking about, like, what's the perspective I'm going to need to cultivate about these things that I'm going to have to do or experience or create to be that person? And so it's like this kind of this back and forth of striving means you have some sort of vision, which I think is super, super important. But I think the vision of yourself and who you are is the thing that matters more than the vision of any sort of accomplishments.
Mhm.
So, so
Beautifully
there.
said. Thank you. I love that. Thank you. Where do you feel joy leading you in your faith, in life, and in your creativity right now?
Where I feel life, like, what's unfolding to me as possibilities right now, I is gonna kind of sound weird to say, is like weirder art, messier, scribblier art. That feels really exciting to me. Not just because for me, it's fun to look at, but it's also for me to create messy art that really gives me the fizz, that really excites me. It means that I have let go of a lot of like trying to fit in, trying to make it look a certain way. I will just have, let it be this physical expression. And so
Yeah.
the indication that's really exciting to me. But also just there's something weird. I'll just share this little snippet. You can do with it what you will. But I've always loved listening to near-death experience stories. I think they're so fascinating. I've listened to hundreds, I don't know, read them ever since I was younger. I've always thought they were fascinating. And I even remember thinking, like, why am I so into these? They're so interesting to me, from people from all over the world, all different faith walks. And one thing that every single near-death experience I have ever listened to has come back saying, whether you believe in the near-death experiences or not, the theme that's always the same is when these people who've had these experiences come back, they say, all this trivial stuff that you're really worked up about, none of it matters.
Mhm.
And and then usually there's something along the lines of just love your people.
Yeah.
But then there's to me the one of the most important messages that some people share really directly, but some people they don't really say it, but you can tell it's the theme in it, where they just say, just be yourself, like trust that you are a sufficient, radiant, amazing human,
Mhm.
and there's something really interesting about and this is something I just feel so grateful for in this, even in my grief, is like there's something about losing these 7 people that I've loved so much, that have been in my life basically my whole life, that is kind of like a near-death experience, in that all of this stuff I was worried about, that I've been so worked up about, doesn't matter. And it's not that we've done anything wrong worrying about it. That's just part of the human experience. Worrying about our thighs, or worrying about our bills, or worrying about our that's all just part of the human experience. Nobody has done anything wrong when they've worried about it. But there's a waking up that can happen, right? Where we realize, wait a minute, that's not where I want to put my energy in worrying about stuff like that. I want to put my energy into like not just like loving people, but figuring out who I am and loving myself. Like
Mhm.
really loving this being that God created and loves beyond description. That's that to me is one of the best ways, and I can imagine, to honor God, is to love me as his creation. And I don't mean that in an arrogant,
Right.
self-serving, way. It's like, why would I ever want to diminish one of God's creations? I wouldn't look out at that turkey out there and go, well, I know God loves that turkey. It's just too bad that its neck is like weird. Like why would I do that to myself, right? Like I sorry, turkeys are weird. Wild turkeys.
Great.
They just happen to be walking right here, so they're just like all up in my business these days, setting off my driveway alarm and jumping on my deck rail.
Mm.
Anyway, so it's like, why would I do that to myself? Why would I just diminish myself in any way? And it is like multiple times a day work that I have to remember that.
Mm.
I mean, I get tired on a day where I get tired at 2:30 in the afternoon. My default is to go, well, you're probably not eating right. You're not getting enough sleep. And, I go into this like self-deprecation about why I'm tired at 2:30 in the afternoon. It's like, wait a second. Although those things may be true, why am I beating myself up about it? Like I just know, like, all
Mm.
right, that's a change I want to make. No more sugar, or get to bed before 9, or whatever. Just like looking at
Yeah.
things reasonably. And so when I think about how that interweaves with my creativity, it's like, wow, I've had so much fun creating so many things over the last 20 years slash my whole lifetime. And I've done all that being so up in my head about my worth and value. Imagine how much more fun I could have
Mm.
dropping that baloney
Yeah.
and just living as if I've had a near-death experience. And I remember more often than not, none of that stuff matters. Love my people, love myself,
Mhm.
enjoy the world. Look at it as this amazing, wonderful, incredible experience it is to be alive. And that, in my opinion, applies whether you believe in God or not. The fact that you're alive on this planet at this time with what we have access to is a freaking miracle,
Right.
and I'm saying this now impassioned. Don't be fooled. I forget this 99% of the time, right? But to remember it as frequently as possible, I think is such an important effort, to remember it as frequently as possible. And so I see art coming out of me that kind of blows my mind right now. It feels like mind blowing, but at that time, it'll probably feel like, of course, this is the art that comes out of me because this is how I feel inside. I
Mhm.
want that congruence more and more and more. But also, words are a big part of my creative
Mm.
expression, and most of my words are hidden in a journal. Yeah, I quote unquote microblog on Instagram, but there's a lot of things like I just started an endeavor that I'm currently working titles called Essays on Grief. And let me tell you, I'm writing essays on grief, fully arguing with myself, the world does not need another book about grief. And yet there's something in me that feels like I need to write these, even if it's just for my own medicine,
Right.
even if it's just to share with my siblings or just to work out in my own heart. But I have dreams of written word going out into the world in different ways than it has. And so when I think about that, just the idea of what's possible, it feels really exciting because I have ideas, but I know God can make it a million times better than my best ideas. But my job isn't to make the ideas amazing. My job is to stop worrying about crap that doesn't matter, love my people, love myself, and then do my best to write really messy words. And
Mhm.
then God takes it from there.
Right.
So who
You
knows?
you taught a class one time with Jean Oliver.
Hmm.
Um, I think the in between, something the in between, and I you did a video and there was like a collection of classes that she did. And you did a video in that about journaling, and
Hmm.
that changed me. I have to share that with
Mm.
you.
Mm.
Your tips on how you journal, why you journal, ways to journal. I mean to this day I think I wrote every word you said. I'm not kidding. I
Mm. Oh, I'm
paused
so
and wrote
glad that helped you.
sentences, wrote
Mm.
sentences and then played because it was so inspiring and so encouraging to tap into those words. And
Hmm.
so, as someone who has experienced what you've shared from your journaling, and how it's impacted me, I'm totally encouraging you to put your words out there in whatever way you
Mm.
feel good about doing, because I know it will
Thank
help
you.
people. Yeah, it
Thank
really
you.
will. Yeah.
When I think about, like, this is kind of a weird analogy, but when I think about like the energy of creation, whatever that would look like, maybe it's light, maybe it's vibration, whatever the things science would call vibration or light that God used to create me, I feel like you put a lot of it right here in my throat.
Mm.
There's a lot of energy in my throat, and I think that's just symbolic, of and maybe for other people they feel it other places, but I think for me that's symbolic of like my words are a part of what I came here to use.
Hmm.
And let me tell you, there's nothing like telling a little kid she talks too much to shut that down. So I'm doing a lot of that work right now of like
Yeah.
not only trusting that I have important things to say or things to say that it might be useful or helpful to somebody, but like doing the work of only saying the important words and not saying all, because I got a bazillion words, right? Some of them are probably just for me,
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
So that's probably going to be a lifelong ongoing journey. But like
Absolutely.
to honor whatever God put right here on my throat, what does it look like to honor that? You
Yeah.
know, does it look like just closing my mouth and swallowing it and holding it there? Or does it look like, letting it out, writing it out? And writing usually comes before the spoken word for me. And that really helps me
Hmm.
kind of clarify, so.
How has vulnerability cultivated your work and inspired community?
Well, I have a tenuous relationship with the word vulnerability.
Okay.
I understand the spirit of it.
Hmm.
I think I think a lot of us weaponize it against ourselves.
Okay.
Um, Kind of like, if I make sure I'm vulnerable, then that will prevent you from criticizing me,
No.
and that's fine. I'm not here to say people should or shouldn't do that. For me, I've had to um, recognize that what vulnerability is to me is honesty. Being
Mm.
honest about something that feels really tender. And by sharing it, somebody might weaponize it against me. Somebody might hurt me with it. Somebody might unintentionally say something about it that like stings, right?
Yeah.
But but that's not it's not my job to make sure I respond a certain way. And so if I'm going to be honest in the sense in the flavor of vulnerability, I also will do myself a big service if I um kind of like square up. I don't know, that's not quite the right word, but like stand tall in my honesty and just own it. Just own my
Hmm.
honesty versus, oh, I have this little honest thing to tell you, but don't hurt me, don't hurt me, don't hurt me,
Yeah.
And that's a range, right? That's a spectrum. I'm not saying
Right.
it's just one or the other. But I if what's my honesty for? What's the vulnerability for? If it's to give other people courage, but I offer it really weak and afraid and timid, it's only going to be able to offer anyone so much courage, So vulnerability is tricky in that when you are honest, you are exposing a part of yourself,
Right.
but are you exposing a part of yourself to be coddled and reaffirmed and and like for other people to tell you you're amazing? If I'm vulnerable, then other people can reaffirm me versus if I'm honest, I'm owning who I am already.
Right.
And it's a little tricky to describe because I'm still like working it out for myself, but there's a confidence, there's a sturdiness in honesty that I don't feel like I have when I'm in that sort of tender vulnerability state. And I think there's a place for that vulnerability. That's,
Mhm.
with your spouse, with your beloved, with your therapist, with your people who will never weaponize this against you.
Right.
I'm not convinced that social media is the place for vulnerability in
Whatever
that
gave you that
flavor,
idea.
right? In that flavor. And that isn't to say don't be authentic. I'm
Right.
just saying like own it. Own your
Right.
authenticity. Like speak this like really scary thing, but with a little, even if it's just a tiny little bit of confidence and just like, hey, here's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Like, you know, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what's tough.
Yes.
And if you're doing it expecting or demanding or requiring that other people see you, I say that with air quotes, see you and hear you and affirm you, and you're not doing that to yourself, I think you're being vulnerable for the wrong reasons.
Right.
That's just my opinion.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
everybody wants to be seen, but a million people can see you and it doesn't matter if you still don't see yourself.
Right. And I would say that see the word vulnerable, when I think of the things that you share, some
Mm-hmm.
of the things that you share, to me,
Mm-hmm.
from the perspective of the definition of it, you
Mm-hmm.
have come across to me at times as you're sharing your vulnerability, but you are sharing it in the way where you did this square up. I'm being
Mm-hmm.
honest, and this is where I'm at. And I think that that reaches people. I mean, it reaches me,
Mm.
and I'm sure it reaches other people. So I think you are living out what you just described in what I see as far as vulnerability that you share on social media, which again
Mm-hmm.
is its own realm of whatever that could be. But I do
Yeah.
see you squaring up. This is honest. This is my journey. This is the part of my journey that I'm sharing with you to hopefully it will, encourage you or inspire you in some
Mm-hmm.
way is what I take from
Mm-hmm.
it. So
Mm-hmm.
just so you know,
Yeah.
putting that back at you, I do think you
Mm.
share it in that way. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I strive for.
Yeah.
Speaking about striving. Yeah, I mean it's really a scary reality to know that when you love somebody or you befriend somebody or you share something about yourself that's really personal, you're exposing your underbelly to somebody
Yeah.
that could hurt you.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is, I trust that you won't.
Right.
And then what you're saying on top of that is, I trust myself to handle it if you do anyway.
Exactly.
And that's where
Exactly.
the kind of squaring myself up comes from, is like, you might do with this, like, I'm just gonna assume that there's a whole lot of gossip about me I've never heard and don't know anything about. Like, I'm just gonna assume that.
Right. Doesn't
What am
matter.
I gonna do with that? I'm just living my life,
Yeah.
doing
Right.
my own work.
Right.
I got my own work to do. I can't worry about your work. You know? It's
But
like,
you do give great, what would be the word? You give great tidbits,
mm,
insight, tips, suggestions, ideas to help people do their own work.
good. I hope so.
Yeah, you do. You do.
I hope
And
so.
and
Good.
see, like you can take the word strive and you
Mm-hmm.
can do the positive and the negative of strive, and you can take the word surrender and do the positive and negative surrender. And that made me think differently about both of those words,
Mm,
where I wouldn't have
good.
had we not had this conversation, right? So it's just something that you kind of do naturally, I think, because it's not just in
Mm,
those two words that I've witnessed you do that. So you do give us good, your followers, you give us good insight into a lot of things, and I appreciate that. So I want you to know
oh,
that.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad to know that.
Yeah.
Because there is definitely the echo chamber effect, of social media.
Yeah.
Hello, anyone out there, But
I
I
remember when
just,
you did a post a day for the 100-day project.
Instagram live every day
Oh,
for 100
yes.
consecutive days.
That was
I tell you what, day
amazing.
50, I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. I went through, like, you guys saw it all, the ups and the downs, and it was a good exercise for
You
me. It was
did
a
it
really good
though.
exercise
You
for me.
did
I
it
did it
though.
every single
Yes.
day.
Every single
Even
day.
sometimes at like 11:30 at night, out on my deck with no makeup, half in the dark. It's like, oh, I gotta get this in.
What fills your creative well of inspiration?
Mm. Well, back to the gratitude. I'm telling you, every
Okay.
time gratitude
Gratitude.
really fills my well. But also doing something sort of out of my daily norm, I just had lunch with a new friend for a couple hours and all we did was talk, right? But it's like it kind of wakes up a sleeping part of me whenever I do something kind of different. Going through my art supplies and cleaning, that's that really sparks a lot of inspiration and it fills my creative well in the sense that I feel connected to my materials. I feel like they're an extension of me, not just the stuff I got to figure out what to do with. I think good conversation probably does that more than anything. Looking at beautiful things,
Mm.
I'm telling you, Pinterest, a museum, a
Yeah.
fabric store, an antique shop, anything where there's lots of things to look at. A
Okay.
lot of ideas get sparked there.
All right.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, but the practice of gratitude, and there's a difference between like sparking ideas and filling my creative well to me, and they play off each other. But like the thing that really, really fills my creative well is whatever also fills my spiritual well, and that's almost always going to be journaling. Journaling is just
Mm.
like I keep trying to find something cooler, and it's just the thing that just keeps working for me. And active practices of gratitude.
Absolutely. And I think I'm saying absolutely to the journaling because God speaks to us through his word.
Hmm.
So why wouldn't he use words when we're journaling to speak to us, to help us and
Hmm.
guide us? It just, yeah, I know for myself when I journal, I have so much more clarity. So, just
Yeah.
so much better, healthy clarity,
Well, and
insight,
my
all of it.
journaling has evolved a lot. It used to be very much like, "Hey God, what should I do with my life?"
Yeah.
And it made sense why it was hard to hear an answer. Because that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
And I've come to believe that he's like, "Well, there's 50 things you could do that I'd love for you to do. Which one do you want?"
Hmm.
I fully believe that we've been gifted a buffet of options
Hmm.
and that one of our divine assignments is to learn how to choose,
Mm.
and then own that choice. And to not just be waiting to be like there was a scripture I remember growing up with where it says, I can't quote it and I couldn't tell you where it is, but it's something like there are people who act and there are people who are acted upon. Don't be someone who's acted upon, meaning someone that needs to be told every little thing to do before they'll move, right?
Hmm.
And likewise, my dad used to say, you can't steer a parked car, right? So you're sitting there saying, God, which way do I go? And he's like, start the engine and start driving, and I'll tell you when to turn. I think
Yeah.
that's more true than we're sitting there and God says, go east. I think more it's like once we're moving, now we're in a position where we can be directed and guided and steered once we're
Right.
moving. And so my journaling has evolved from like, hey, God, what do I do with my life? To like, hey, God, I'm thinking about doing this thing. I
Hmm.
have this idea. Is that a good idea for me to pursue? And I work really hard as much as possible to take only yes and no questions to him. Not because I think his answers are that simple, but sometimes they are. But because that's an answer I can feel. I can feel I am, and I don't know if this is true for everybody, but for me, like I know what it feels like to take a question, a yes or no question to God and to feel that like warmth of confirmation versus what I grew up being told, a stupor of thought. Anything that feels like confusion, lack of clarity, to me that's a no, at
Yeah.
least in this context. So if
Right.
I can bring this yes or no question in my journal, like, hey God, I'm thinking about this, tell me what I need to know. And then I my journaling, a lot of it is writing a letter to God about something specific, ending it with like, tell me what I need to know, or is this a yes or a no kind of a thing? And then I hold my pen on the next page until I start feeling words come. And I'm
Hmm.
not like, it's not like channeling or hearing voices or anything. It's just what message is being put on my heart in
Yeah.
response to what I just asked,
Right.
and then that comes out. So I feel like it's like it very much often feels like a conversation, not
Yeah.
like I give him a question he can easily answer. or I can easily hear the answer to, I guess is more an accurate way to say.
Right? Based on your experiences, what are three things listeners can do today to lean into embracing beauty and creating with it?
Oh, well, the three things that are going to be most effective for everybody are probably going to change a little bit. But I think generally speaking, spending at least, this is going to sound like torture for some people, especially if you're addicted to screens, at least 10 minutes first thing in the morning in some sort of meditation. And I'm
Mm.
not talking about really wordy prayer. I'm not talking about writing. I'm talking about just sitting and paying attention to nothing but your breath and just like every day making a practice of stillness. And your mind,
Mm.
you won't go more than 10 seconds without a thought coming, right? 3 seconds maybe at the most. But the practice of bringing yourself back to just like I focus on right inside my nostrils where the air is coming in, and just being in that stillness for 10 minutes. Journaling would be another practice I would highly encourage almost everybody, even people who think that journaling is not their thing. 99 out of 100 people who think journaling isn't their thing has either only tried it one or two kinds of ways or they haven't even really tried it. I think there is a way of it could work for everybody. I'm not saying my way is the way everybody should do it, but figuring out some way to get some thoughts tangled up out of your head and in a way where you can see them and like maybe assess them with a little bit of logic and prayer instead of then just being like word soup. And then I guess the third thing would be whatever it is that you're curious about creating, just go do that thing. I know that sounds so cliche, but so many of us think we need to know a little bit more or to have more time or to have people supporting us or to know how it's going to end or to have a space cleared. Like the reasons people give for having not pursued something they're curious about pursuing are endless. And if you find yourself thinking, well, yeah, but I don't have a space. Well, what if that doesn't matter? What if I do have a space? Where might it be? On my lap in the car? Like come up with come up with some solution. Don't let the excuses win and just experiment for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days with just going all in on exploring that curiosity and see what happens. And you might get to the end of it and go, well, that wasn't any fun. But now you know, and you can do the
Mm-hmm.
next thing that you're curious about. So like how at 48, I'm looking at people like young people in their 20s that started businesses during COVID and they're talking about how long it took them. And I'm like, girl, that was 3 years. It took you 3 years to get 200,000 followers, and you're talking about how long it took you. It's taken me 20 and I'm still not, like there's a whole
Yeah.
idea of like how long something takes is so subjective, but like stop dilly-dallying. We don't, I want to say that on one hand, we have all the time we need. So many of
Right.
us, especially midlife women, feel like running out of time. On the other hand, why do you want to waste any of it?
Right.
Doubting or waiting or wishing something or thinking something needs to be better first, thinking your husband needs to support you or that your kids need to get it or that your friends need to do it with you. Like, why are you wasting any of that time that you have plenty of? And
Yeah.
I'm talking to myself here too, because I'm
Right.
super guilty of this.
Right.
But yeah, those would be some tips. And it's gonna feel super awkward. It's gonna feel embarrassing. It's gonna feel all sorts of things. And so what?
So what?
What's the alternative? You sit there and
Right.
wonder. You
Yeah.
sit there and think someday, what's the alternative? That's a really potent question for me a lot of the times. What's the alternative? Usually I don't want the alternative. So yeah, those would be some recommendations I would have.
Okay. Wonderful. All right, Stephanie, thank you so much for your time today in this wonderful interview. I can't wait to share it. And I will post all of your links and everything below the video and in the podcast description. So, where can people find you the easiest, though?
Well, I'm most active on Instagram usually, which is Stephanie Lee Maker, all one word on Instagram. But my website is stephanieleeart.com. That's where you can find my whole library of classes and work that I have available, that kind of stuff. But I'm most active on Instagram. And then again, my classes are on my website. So
Great.
either place is
Wonderful.
good.
All right. Thank you, dear friend. I'm so happy we got to connect here.
Thank you. Thank
All
you. It's
right.
been an awesome conversation. Good for me.
Good for me too.
It's
All
super
right.
good for me.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye, everybody.